Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Health Seminar Series. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Akane Sano. I'm a faculty member at Rice University, ECE department. And today we are very excited to welcome Professor Cecilia Mascolo from University of Cambridge. And so let me briefly introduce her and also talk about the logistics of the seminar. Professor Cecilia Mascolo is the full professor of mobile systems in the Department of Computer Science and Technology, University of Cambridge. She is co-director of Center for Mobile Wearable System and Augmented Intelligence and deputy head for research. And she is the recipient of the ERC Advanced Research Grant. And she holds a PhD from University of Bologna. And her research interests are in mobile systems and data for science, human mobility modeling, sensor systems, and networking and mobile data analysis. And I have been following her work for a while since because we are working on something very similar. We have something in common. And so today we are very excited to learn Professor Cecilia's research. And just for logistics, so this webinar is recorded, as you might already know. And if you have any questions while we are running the seminar, please type your questions into Q&A box you can see at the bottom of the Zoom window. And then we will go through your questions after her talk. And also you can raise your hand on Zoom as well after we finish our talk. Then I think that's all. So I will hand our microphone to Professor Mascolo. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you for being here. I know it's a reasonably early time for you in the US. So in this talk, first of all, I would like my mouse. I would like to talk about our experience in using devices, wearable and devices we carry, such as mobile phone, to gather data that for health monitoring diagnostics. So the first thing I want to do is give you an idea of the things I've been working in the last few years, and then I will concentrate on a recent project that is related with audio data diagnosis. So I work with various clinical and non-clinical researchers interested in health and well-being monitoring. This goes from public health, behavior intervention, to psychology, to more clinical examples such as cardiology and digestive, respiratory and digestive clinicians. There are challenges in doing all of this, and I don't want to go through just a list of things we've been doing, but I have two projects that we've been doing in the past that kind of set the scene of the latest project. This is a project from 2013 where we crowdsourced data from mobile phones. So we put out an app that was picked up by the BBC and other venues to collect data that users would want to volunteer about their mood. So we were asking for self-reporting their moods, but we were also passively sensing data. So at that time, the Holy Grail, and still is, I think, is trying to understand if we can use sensing from devices as a sort of proxy for things that are more difficult to understand, and mood being one of them. We expected to have a low participation instead, because probably of the timing and the type of the app that we put out. This was picked up quite heavily, and we had about 18,000 users participating over the 3 years that the app stayed out. This is a simple, there are a couple of papers written on this. One is at the bottom there. What I want to show you here is just a simple, intuitive picture. They say figures are about represent 1,000 words. Well, this one really does in a way. This is about 150 people, and this is the timeline during the day, in weekdays and weekends, in 3 groups that are clustered automatically depending on the level of activity as collected from the accelerometer data of people's phones. So these are 3 clusters of, you see the most active people that are quite active during the day in the top row, and in the weekend they're still very active, but they shift their timeline a bit later in the day. There's a medium cluster there, and there's a less active cluster there. What we found in a bunch of papers that were written about the subject is that, in fact, there is quite a good correlation between activity, which is not exactly physical activity only, simply activity level of a person. Is the person doing things? Essentially, this is a representation what an accelerometer can tell you for a day's life, and their mood reports as reported by them throughout the various parts of the days and the week. So this was quite, this was crowdsourced data, very noisy. We're still doing analysis on this data set, as you can imagine. We found correlations with location, but so crowdsourced data as a source of large data set that can be analyzed automatically to understand populations and understand behavior, possibly with passive sensing. Another work I haven't talked about in a while, but you will see in a moment why it's relevant, is work we have done with devices, Bluetooth, with various radios, Bluetooth, infrared, and also other sound-based radios to understand interaction behavior in buildings, so and use of space, in fact. So how much are people interacting, face-to-face interactions, how long are these face-to-face interactions, among which kind of people are these interactions happening, and what are the radios that are best for this. This graph, again, I like graphs. So this is a representation of a group of researchers moving from an old building, first matrix, into a new building, second matrix. And the researchers are indicated on the X and Y axis, so the same index means the same researcher. And the darker squares mean that the researchers have met more often. So they have quite a considerable amount of interaction. As you can see, usually at this point, I will probe my audience and say, what are the things you see in this graph? Now, on a Zoom seminar, I won't do that. I will tell you what you see in this graph. So between the two buildings, you have differences. So the users are also grouped, ordered per group. So group A is the first 7 or 8 users, group C is the second, group B is the third. And what you see here is that in the new building, there is a lot more interaction beyond the groups, so across groups. And this we went further into analysis in the paper, and we figured out that actually this interaction was due to different structures in the building, different positions of the team, and so on. The reason why I brought this up in the seminar is because we also, as part of this study, we also looked at how different radios, Bluetooth and infrared, but especially Bluetooth, which is now considered very much for understanding contact tracing in the era of COVID, is doing in various scenarios. So on the top, you see different configurations of people, and if you imagine that these people were wearing a Bluetooth tag in front of their chest, we have positioned these people in various in these various configurations, and we have looked at the performance of Bluetooth. The two graphs represent the different types of performance received, beacon and RSS. And what you can see essentially is that you can't really distinguish very well if two users are face-to-face or are not face-to-face when you look at Bluetooth. So you have to really be careful in using Bluetooth for this kind of tracking and things. So proximity, and I know researchers are looking into this already, proximity is only one of the measures you can use to understand how close someone has been and what kind of exposure someone had. And there are lots of probabilistic models coming out in this area to understand if we really can do something in this area. I am not working in this area anymore, but I thought I should bring it out because I've been reflecting over this sort of work for quite a while, just because of the situation we're in. There are many researchers that I know have brought this forward and have come up with very good ideas. But so this was something we have been doing for a while. There is another sensor that is present in very many devices we either carry or we have around in the environment we have, and that's a microphone. Why would we want to use microphone in the context of health and well-being? Well, it is a cheap sensor. It can be put into devices reasonably easily and cheaply, in fact, so it could scale to large population and in a cost-effective manner. It is with the user constantly, so given this sort of continuous sensing ability that we often want from this sort of technology. And so for about a year, I've concentrated on a project which is funded by the European Research Council, which concentrates on, first of all, collecting large data set in the context of cardiovascular, respiratory, and digestive research, clinical research, and devise models that are able to have some sort of possibly diagnostic power in terms of screening, perhaps if this is something that needs further testing, classifying a disease across perhaps a variety of diseases in the same class, understanding progression of a disease, and perhaps looking at if we could understand if something could be in need of urgent care. One aspect which is really interesting in my research is the idea that all this might be better put, or part of this modeling, part of this logic might be better put on devices and possibly integrated with other sensor input for continuous monitoring. So I'll talk a bit at the end about this system challenge that I think is relevant here, because of data, just clustering all data in the cloud might not be the best, both in terms of privacy, but also in terms of efficiency. And one other important thing is we're talking about clinical analysis of data, automatic analysis, but I advocate for a model where the clinician is really in the loop, because I don't think we can solve this problem thinking that machine learning can do it all. So the ability of having some sort of interpretability in the way in which the modeling happens will allow this doctor in the loop approach. I haven't worked on this much. I'll give you some hint at the end if I have time on the direction I think I would like to move forward in this area. Starting from 2010, we've been doing some work. So this was published in 2010, so we started a bit early, but this is a Ubicon 2010 paper where we use microphones of Symbian phones. So these were Nokia Symbian phones, quite luckily, with very good battery. So we could do emotion recognition from the speaker's microphone on device using Gaussian mixture model and libraries of actors' voices that were used to train. And we have ported it on Android, but essentially this was at the time on-device recognition of emotions, which was using the voice as a mechanism to kind of understand well-being of users. Since then, of course, other researchers have shown that voice is indicative of lots of diseases. And this article of my T-Tech review indicates that post-traumatic stress disorder could be identified through voice. Even heart diseases could be identified through voice. One paper I like, because this is a talk not just about my work, I like to cite this paper from colleagues in University of Washington that have used 911 calls data to analyze with simple classifiers, in fact, if someone was at risk of cardiac arrest, imminent cardiac arrest. They've gone further, they've analyzed the 911 calls, but they've also added noise to the data to show that if this voice was coming from devices around in the house, such as our Amazon devices, for example, Alexa and the like, it could still be possible to do something like that. Yeah, so that is an interesting line. In terms of other sounds of our body, the heart is a good indicator, is a good example of all this. So we know that heart health is measured usually with a simple and cheap ECG, but there are diseases that cannot be determined by just using this electrical signal. You would need a sort of different signals to understand diseases that are often related to the valves of the heart. Listening to the heart is something that clinicians tend not to do much of anymore, because all of this is substituted by echocardiogram that are able to understand all the pathologies without the human ear to have to listen to the body. So this is something that is getting somehow discontinued. However, the question that we have is, what if instead of a human, we had a machine able to listen to the sound of the heart? Would it be able to detect things better and more easily and help the doctors to do this? For this sort of study, you need data, and it turns out this is Harvey, is a simulator of patient heart pathology through sounds. In the UK, it's very difficult to find one. We had to go, I think this one was in Birmingham Hospital, because no one is training doctors on sound diagnostics anymore because of the echocardio data. So collecting this sort of data is useful. We started with obviously simulation data, and we're trying to collect further data from the heart. There is, in general, both for, I'll get to respiratory, but there is in general for cardiology and respiratory, and actually digestive as well, very limited data collected throughout the world that could be used by us computer scientists to train models, because doctors tend to train each other in different ways. So they tend to listen to the same person and train by showing the new doctor how to do it. However, there start to be efforts into this. This is an example of a paper that has started collecting cardiovascular data and showing that sounds can be classified automatically. And there is more. So one thing that I want to reflect on here is the ability to diagnose disease X from sound coming from perhaps position Y. I had numerous conversations with the doctors I know in the different clinical areas, and it is difficult to have this conversation with them, because when you ask, can you diagnose this if you had this sound, they often there is a difference in what the machine can listen to and what a human ear can listen to. So perhaps we don't know yet what we can do with machines that could help doctors. And this is an area that needs investigation, but needs clinicians to help us investigate this area. We can't just do it alone. I mean, you can, of course, crowdsource the data and try something, but then I think you need to have the clinicians involved for this. And this is just a reflection. Of course, there are the things that doctor can't do, is to continuously listen to a person's heart or a person's bowel. And so the idea of having devices that go with you all the time and provide you with a continuous view of a disease is something new, something that even the clinicians I've talked to at least are not used to reflecting those terms, are not used to think that maybe by continuously listening, you might be able to detect things you haven't thought of before. And that, I think, is also something that I would like to continue talking to them about. We have started this very, very rudimentally. This is one of my master students last year produced this device, which is a chest device that doesn't have a microphone, has some batteries and things, and we were doing some testing on what sounds we could hear and for how long, what was the efficiency. And so this is an area where I have a team that is really trying various things on various parts of the body and various clinics. Now, while this is going on, well, COVID happened. And COVID is, from what we know, is partly a disease that exhibits respiratory symptoms. There is already literature on trying to do automatic respiratory analysis of sounds for other diseases. This is a survey that I found some time ago that tries to do it for some disease such as asthma and pneumonia and COPD and other diseases. So they collected some data, they tried a few things. And so this is the line of work that is happening and is interesting. And so what we've done at that point is that we decided to set up a crowdsourced data collection, a bit like the one I presented at the beginning, and that's roughly why I presented it. Try to push out tools, so apps, that would allow users to crowdsource, to allow us to crowdsource data from users. And in collaborations with people that know a little bit more about respiratory diseases than me, and we've pushed this out. And if you want, you or any of your family to contribute the data, that's the URL up there, covid-19-sounds.org. I will now, this part of the talk will now concentrate on what we have done in the data collection, the type of data we've collected, and the very initial results we start having. So what does this tool do? Well, if you install the app on your phone, and this is the iOS version, so it has the 3 screenshots of some of the apps, it will ask you for your age and gender, and it will ask you for your medical history and for your symptoms. So it's a questionnaire. And then it will ask you for something quite unique with respect to other apps that collect survey data about the disease. It will ask you to collect your breathing sounds and record them, and they will be sent to our service. It will collect the coughs 3 times, and it will collect the data while you're reading, your voice while you're reading the data on the screen. And the sentence on the screen is, "I hope my data can help manage the virus pandemic," which, I'll go to that a bit later. In terms of numbers, this is a graph fresh from the press from one of our collaborators. He has printed the latest. So we have more than 8,000 users to contribute the data. Of course, because this is mostly from European countries at the time of the collection, which started in April, many of them weren't being tested at all. So we formally only have 300 people who have been tested positively. And even together, only a few more, like let's say 500 in total, have been tested altogether. This number is changing in Europe, so we hope to get better data as we move along. But that's the number to keep in mind. Below, we have statistics of the people who have contributed the data. The PNTS means prefer not to say. So people had the chance to not say their age. And so it's kind of skewed towards younger generations, but we have a good representation of older generations too. In terms of countries, very skewed towards Europe, because that's where the media press was most supportive. And Greece, we've done very good in Greece. We had a good researcher, went on all sorts of press and newspapers and talked to them, and that was really good. People, of course, also didn't want to tell us the location, so the none bar at the bottom is because of that. This is a graph that requires a little bit of analysis. Of course, we've only done graphs of some of the data. This is all very fresh and recent. This is the Android app data, which was the first we managed to push out. I can give a completely different seminar on our difficulties in convincing both Apple and Google to push out the app, because we had COVID everywhere in the name, and we were not giving feedback to the user. So this was just a crowdsourced data collection, and there were, I think we ended up in the category of exploitation of unprecedented events. And so I had to appeal a number of times. It took us a month to get through this process, and then eventually the app was released. So the graph shows that the most common medical history, not symptoms, but clinical data was high blood pressure, and 2 dots linked, like in one of the bottom parts of the graph, indicates that that group of users had asthma and high blood pressure. That's the first one you see there. And up you see the quantity of users in this group that had this sort of symptoms. So we have history about these users. At the same time, we also graphed a portion of our data users, the numbers at the bottom, COVID positives versus non-COVID tested. So people who said they had COVID because they've been tested, and people who they weren't tested, which are many, in fact, in even just this subset of the data. The good thing to note is that cough was an important symptom for the COVID positives, but also one thing that has given us the belief that this data is not so bad is that smell taste loss, which we know from other studies is an important symptom for COVID, prominently showed up in our most important symptoms, while it didn't show up in the non-COVID user group there. So there's something about the symptoms as declared by the users that might be indicative of the goodness of the data, and we were kind of happy to see this. So out in the literature, as soon as we started looking, we saw a paper recently pushed on arXiv at the time, so in April, that showed that in a subset of users on which they collected cough from phones, they could, using some trained AI, they could understand if it was a COVID cough or not. And we know of a small number of groups that are going in the same directions, and we are in touch with them, and I'll talk about a little bit more later about these groups. This is, if you look at the link at the bottom, Rita Singh from CMU gave an interview in Forbes about the fact that they had a tool and they had studied coughs, and they thought the COVID cough had some unique features. So this is the spectrograms of our data, our coughs, where we tried to represent what she meant in that work. And as you can see on the top right, a normal cough as activity of the vocal folds immediately after the cough happens. This is 3 coughs, by the way, because our data is collected as 3 coughs per user. So you see some vocal folds activity identifiable on the top right there. A wet cough as high energy spread is also unique, while they think that there are some characteristics of the COVID cough at the low frequency level that could be indicative. And this is kind of where we started with this. And then we went on to analyze a very small at the time, well, just a couple of months ago, subset of the data, and we produced this work, which is on arXiv, and it's accepted as a KDD Health Day. And I will go a little bit more into details of what we've done for this work and our plans for the future, and then I will end on some challenges in general with this sort of type of data. More details in the paper, of course, you can just retrieve it. So this is the overall architecture. I will go through the 4 steps that you see here to describe a little bit what we're doing with the data. So first of all, we in this particular paper, we were only considering cough and breathing. We're not looking at voice, although that voice is something that we're looking at right now. So they're coughs, they're breathing, and these are the spectrograms of one sample of this. And then we had the problem of, okay, what is it that we want to do? We want to distinguish COVID people from healthy people. And so how do we know in our crowdsourced data what the COVID people are the healthy people? Well, COVID people, we have people who said they've tested for COVID, and they also said how recently they've tested for COVID. So we sampled that and used those as a COVID positive. Now, this is where I pause and say, when you develop an app, you of course think later of what would have been a good question to ask. And one question we didn't ask was, have you tested negative for COVID? We do now, but at the time, at the beginning, the first 2 months, we didn't have this question. So we had to identify for this particular paper users that were healthy, but we didn't know who in our crowdsourced data was healthy. So what we did is that for this particular study, we used users that had no symptoms, and they were from countries where COVID was not prevalent at the time. So at the beginning of April, for example, Greece was a country, and still is a country with low prevalence. Now it's a bit further down, but at the time it wasn't. So we used certain type of users for that. Now, luckily, we have better data, but this study was done with that, and I should just say. At the bottom, you find our 3 tasks that we looked at for automatic recognition, which was, can we try to distinguish COVID positive user from non-COVID, so healthy in this sense users. And then we looked at COVID positive users that also declared a cough. So we're not just saying I have COVID, but they also were saying I have a cough. And non-COVID users that also declared a cough. COVID, and we also have a further task. Oh, here's my cat that comes on every single teleconference I have. I don't know if you can see. And and we also looked at non-COVID asthma coughs, so people with asthma as well, to see if we could see any difference with respect to COVID. So in terms of modeling and features, I'll go a little bit more details, but we used a set of traditional audio features. We extracted it from both the old segments and from sliding windows. And we used a trained model by Google, VGG-ish, that generates audio feature. This model is trained on YouTube audio, and it generates features over the input data, and we gave our data as input. So the features are obvious ones that I use for audio. The first thing is on the top line, you see the 3 coughs that we have, and we trimmed. So the orange bottom part is the trimmed coughs, and we calculated various features on that, such as the period between the 2 peaks, the duration of the 3 coughs, and features that are related to this. Also in terms of frames level feature, 100 milliseconds, sliding window, overlapping of 50%, and features that can tell us a bit about the level of energy and magnitude of the spectrogram, essentially. These are very typical audio features. I don't think I should bore you with them. You find the details in the paper. This again is a representation of spectrogram, MFCCC, 13th of them, plus first derivative and second derivative of that as features as well. And the setup, which is probably most interesting, the 3 tasks I've already described. So COVID versus non-COVID, COVID cough versus healthy with cough, or healthy in the sense non-COVID with cough, and COVID with cough and asthma. 3 modalities. Meaning we used cough breathing and cough and breathing together, and 3 features type, meaning the audio features identified on manually identified, or the VGG features, or both. And we ran a set of classification tasks with different disjoint 80-20 train and testing sets and cross validations, and looked at metrics. The interesting bit here is the recall, which is obviously, can I find the people that have COVID, is lower here. So these are the 3 tasks in the table: the modality, cough plus breathing, cough and breathing. In the 4th column, you see the feature type. The feature type means do we use just the manual features, the VGG features, or both? And we see that when we use both, the 3 there in the feature type indicates we have higher performance. So to me, these results are not trustworthy in total. We need, the small data. We also do augmentation, not only in this table, but we should. The augmentation helps. But the recall is the thing that I think we can improve on. This is the most important part in terms of medical, and so take these with a pinch of salt, but this is what we are looking at. And the next thing we're looking at is, of course, better data, richer data, and the voice. One thing that I find interesting in the crowdsourced data we are collecting is that we are asking people to come back to the app every couple of days to give us another sample. And this graph, which was generated a couple of days ago, is the number of users that have given us more than 1 report, essentially, as you can see there. 167 out of those 10,000 unique users have more than 10 reports. It's difficult for people to come back. Most people just give us one report. But I highlight, and I would like luckily, luckily the data is anonymous, because I really would like to send a gift to this user. They gave us more than more than 100 cup there. It's fantastic to see that people were sticking to it. Why is it important? Well, we have looked at this data, and some of these people in the area under the curve there are transitioning from being positive to being negative COVID tested, or transitioning from being negative to being positively COVID tested. So this is precious data for us, and we're looking forward to try to get more of this, because I think even just progression, in-person progression, or certain groups or certain types of people progression will be invaluable. We haven't looked at this yet. We don't have enough data for doing any analysis yet. Now, I want to take just 5 minutes to step back and look at challenges in general in this sort of crowdsourcing data or large data for wearables analysis. Noise and heterogeneity, especially in the study with COVID sounds, but also in the study with the Emotionsense, the mood data that I showed at the beginning. Every device is different, every sensor is different, every microphone is different. Everyone who's recording their coughs does it in a different way. Everyone records their voices does it in a different way. In addition to the fact that now if we look at just voice, we have languages and accents. So the challenges are enormous, even just for one single proportion of all this wearable problems. There is noise around it. So we as a community, we have, I think, a tremendous challenge. Even if you think of, problems related to data labeling. So if you want to look at transfer learning from one data set to another, if you have different devices with different characteristics, it might make the transfer learning more difficult. Data labeling is a big problem. How do we know, in the COVID case, I just gave you an example of the problem. We don't know which user is actually COVID. If we were in a hospital, and some of our colleagues are in fact collecting specific smaller data set in hospitals, we have the large data that is not labeled, or it's labeled by users, and therefore there's a limit to how much we can trust it. But also in activity recognition, the data labeling is a big problem. We're working with epidemiologists on, they've collected beautiful high-level activity recognition data from wearables, but it's unlabeled, and with all the challenges related to that. I talked about on-device a bit earlier, and I've discussed the fact that I think when I talk to clinicians, I describe this sort of data collection and modeling as a clinical trial. So to me, the COVID Sounds project is a clinical trial. I'm asking people to somehow breach their privacy by giving me their voice, their sounds, and I will build a model that I hope to be able to put on devices, so that when we put the drug out to the population, this is a drug that it can stay on their devices, not violating their privacy. So that's the idea of doing research of this kind. I think is very promising. Even hybrid solutions will be interesting in this domain. And this is the answer to the privacy perspective of a system researcher, in a way. This is a project we have with Google, where we try to bring this forward into the idea of continually updating a model to become more specific to a user, or specific to the change that is happening to that user. And looking at also resource trade-offs, and looking at this from the perspective of that aspect of the system. I talked at the beginning about the fact that I think accuracy in clinical, especially in these domains, is not enough, especially because we do need the clinicians in the loop. We do need to involve them. We do need to have their opinion, and we need to be able to share data with them. This is something I cite all the time, that the Apple Watch has this ECG feature, and at some point they highlighted that the false positives meant people kept going to the doctor completely scared of the fact that they had atrial fibrillation. So how do we solve this problem? There are techniques that are introducing uncertainty and interpretability. This is a paper that uses Bayesian deep neural networks to solve the problem of diabetic retinopathy, and they try to introduce the level of uncertainty of the prediction on this sort of image recognition data set. Works have started to appear, crop up, in trying to port this onto our sort of wearable data, and possibly building on this sort of general ideas to give sort of uncertainty estimation and link it to system performance as well, so that we can possibly have these things on devices and help the prediction there. So with this, I think I would like to say, if, well, given one of the studies that is ongoing, of course, please contribute the data and spread the word. I suspect most of my audience will be in the US, and I know you guys are pretty much peak at the moment in terms of COVID, I'm afraid, and I'm sorry. Please contribute the data and spread the word. I also would like to thank all the collaborators, and I'm sure I missed some out. And if you're interested, beyond asking me questions in a minute, if you're interested in getting in touch with me, my details are down there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we have some questions on the Q&A panel. So I will ask each of you to speak up. So first of all, Shibaran. So let me see.
Yeah, very nice work. Congratulations and thanks for bringing it up. It's very timely. I think hearing and trying to analyze from the sounds is a very nice way of, we probably another tool that doctors may have forgotten to use. And some of the, for example, doctors like in India, they want you to speak, okay, whenever they want to analyze something. I think your work is probably providing credence to the type of analysis. So my question to you is, you collected lot of data. Did you differentiate between the ages and also athleticity of the people? That means if people are exercising, for example, regularly, they have a different way of sounds compared to people who are not.
Thank you for the question. The question, as I say, since we pushed the app out, I had a million ideas of things we could have asked. But every time we introduce a change in what we ask, we generate a data set with different data from the previous one. So we need to be careful when we do that. But no, we don't ask about activity levels. We do ask about smoking, which we thought at the time we were wise enough to think it was important to ask. And asthma, of course, is the other big important one here. I think you're right about the fact that, yeah, we might have people that it's not just about age, it's also about activity. We do not collect continuous data about acceleration. Is just a snapshot of sounds and just one location sample if they allow us to give it. So no, unfortunately no, but I think you're right.
And if I may ask one more question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. The second question is about, for example, what you develop is for sounds, and probably you can get a lot more data if you can sense the skin, right? Maybe I don't know whether you can extend it to that as well, not just sounds.
So are you thinking in terms of COVID?
Yeah, COVID or non-COVID. I mean, COVID is probably temporary and hopefully it will go away.
So why skin for COVID? Sorry.
Any disease, basically will influence the skin level. Either it is, by optical means or other means. Skin has a way of communicating the status of health of a particular person, right?
Yeah, we haven't. I'm sorry, we haven't even gone down that way. No.
Okay, thank you.
Also, I wonder, that would require, we were trying to go for something that could be readily used on any device users already have. So for skin, I guess you could perhaps, that's why I asked your question, because you could switch on a camera and ask the user to position it somewhere so you get some sort of pulse maybe, or I don't know what you're after, but you need to be careful on the kind of things you're asking. Only certain devices have certain things.
Okay, I was thinking of watch, in a sense, but anyway, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to next questions by topic. I think your microphone is already on.
Okay. Hi, Cecilia. Great talk. Really cool work that you and your lab have been doing. I just had a couple of questions. The first one is more machine learning kind of question. Were you able to figure out which audio features were the most important in the 3 classification tasks you talked about?
Yeah, so the answer is complex in the sense that you can look at the breathing and you can look at the cough, and they probably have different order, but the paper has that breakdown. So I don't think we found anything that previous researchers haven't found in terms of liberating thoughts about which feature was best. I think it was just the obvious kind of ordering of things. One thing we want to look more into is that I don't think we have broken down very well the fact that the breathing in a way is indicative of perhaps more frequent breathing means more frequent heart rate and fever. And so features that are related to the number of breathing episodes, perhaps we solicit breathing, but some might breathe more often because they can't breathe slower while they do it. So that we haven't looked at much in detail. So I think every single of this might require a little bit more. We have rushed into some very traditional features for audio instead of considering what could be very specific of this particular disease and things. So I'm the first to say there's so much more to do. One thing I haven't said and I want to say now is that we have prepared the zip file containing the data we've used for this analysis, just the one we have pre-processed. The data is very sensitive, so I cannot release it. The university said don't release it as such, but we have, the lawyers have almost ready the agreement for academic research. We can sign agreements with whoever institution wants it, and we'll be able to share the data. Initially, we just pre-processed this data set, but we will pre-process more and we'll share more. And so on the webpage, we want to share everything. We want to share the models, we want to share the app code data, and we want to share the data. Initially, I thought I could just put the data online, but I've not been allowed to, for good reason.
And my second question was wondering if there has been any research on recording audio or audio classification if people are wearing a mask. I don't know if that really has an impact.
I haven't found any, but we've tried. We've tried because we're trying to go into hospitals, and the hospital have told us, unless you do it in a ward, if you do it in the testing site, everyone there needs to wear a mask. And therefore, we tried, and I think on us, we already saw that the spectrogram had different features. So we stayed clear of that.
I see. Okay. So there is probably, so in the app, for example, you cannot ask them to cough once without and once with a mask, for example.
We could, but we haven't done that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Ashu.
Yeah, again, just like other folks said, fantastic talk, very high impact work. Wanted to just get your thoughts on, are there examples from any other past research where crowdsourced data eventually helped form new clinical workflows?
I guess if you're not talking about audio data, the recent, I can give you a very recent one because it's highly impressed in my mind, but there is a survey-based collection of COVID, which is called Zoe. It's a survey that went out really early in time in the COVID, and it has millions of users. And they pushed out papers that essentially have confirmed in clinical, essentially, the symptoms of the disease. They've just said, smell and taste. Everyone who said they're COVID has this. So you got to look at this. And I think it has influenced the way we then looked at the disease. I now, on the top of my head, I can't think of other big examples of this. But perhaps there are some questionnaires-based things that might have been used in psychology. But maybe I'm the right person to. But it is a good question. I'm going to ask myself that question a bit longer, I think, and try to come up with a list. Do you have examples yourself? Or I guess we're missing them.
Right. I think, yeah, symptoms-based stuff. I think, reporting of symptoms, that I would imagine there would be other cases, COVID being the most recent one. But the user given data, like actual sensor data. I think that's very interesting.
You mean sensor data? Yeah.
Yeah. Any kind of sensor, doesn't have to be the smartphone sensors, but.
Yeah. So, yeah. No, I think it's happening. I know in the UK there's this biobank collection where they collect all sorts of genetic information plus information. They make users wear an accelerometer for a week. And
but I think those are pretty. But I think they are very well done, well designed studies with a lot of control. So I think maybe I should have phrased my question where people have
a lot of control, but no, you'd be surprised how little control on the wearable there is. There are no labels. There are no labels.
I see.
On that data set, and they don't know how the stuff was worn essentially for that week.
I see. I see. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Then let's move on to Vishal.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Cecilia, for a great talk. Good to see a lot of work that you have been trying to do using microphone to, for example, do different kind of sound-based diagnosis besides COVID being the latest work. I want you to briefly share your thoughts on the privacy and ethical concern. You mentioned briefly about this benefit privacy trade-offs, which are there, of course, for the person using the solution themselves. But if you look into more monitoring in the wild scenario, where the microphone is also capturing conversations, for example, of people around the user themselves, who of course do not have any direct benefits. So do you see sort of commercial adoption pathways for microphone-based health diagnostic solutions? So can you see your thoughts a bit more?
Why do you think a solution that hybridly collects data? So if you're thinking, so why is a hybrid on device not solving all the problems? Can you repeat the example where you're saying the data needs to? Yeah, I don't understand. So my answer would be, if we can make sure that the data doesn't leave the device, or at least leaves the device for perhaps another house device where it's really still in your property, let's say, for modeling and analysis, then we are halfway there in a way.
Yeah, but if we want to capture more, so you talk, for example, about capturing mood, where you probably want to go beyond your house, right? So to see how they have been in office or at workplace.
Yeah, but you can. Sure, you can do that, but the models for interpretation. So let's say the tool, the commercial tool, will have to tell you. Let's say I'm selling you a model or a tool that is able to tell you when you need to do something for your health, like you need to. I wouldn't say see the therapist, but perhaps. Consider your health a bit more because you've been doing bad, you've been bad, or you've been depressed, or you've been, not well. Then that tool will use the data that is collected by you traveling across these places, but it will not send the data elsewhere. It'll be a trained model that we're built by doing a clinical trial where we do collect all the data, and then the model. For large scale use is on your device only.
Okay, so yeah, we're somehow constrained to not breach privacy of others around you, right? So that would be the ideal solution.
Yeah, I think that's my hybrid solution. It doesn't. It's also a very efficient solution because you don't want to send all this stuff away. And many companies are picking up on this. There's a lot of on-device. You know, the first set of analysis is already in fact happening on device, especially for audio. Just for efficiency reasons, and perhaps the features and things are sent over.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, my last question is, I'm also wondering about the challenges when you recruit people like remotely. So you have done various research about mood or this COVID-19, and so what are the biggest challenges to recruit people like, remotely?
So for us, it was to reach, making sure that you have enough people that are told of the tool. And to do that, the university has helped a great deal, and the newspaper, but it has required a lot of our effort in pushing it out. Then the other winning thing is having something that users find easy to use, because a good UI is going a long way in giving us the data we want. If they don't understand what they're doing, one example I can give you of something that has gone relatively wrong is in the mood sensing. We used an affect grid. I don't have a slide on this, but we use a grid to ask the users in 2 dimensions how their mood is. So left to right is obviously the intensity of the mood, low or high, and the y-axis would be the variation of it, and users weren't really able to use this matrix. It becomes clear in the results that it's users kind of keep it at the same level on an x-axis essentially. So there are things like this that I think change the way you receive the data. Another example is our non-ASCII users that have, if they had been tested negative, which has become a really problematic issue. We had to change the app for that. But reaching the right demographics, the right group populations, having data from all sources. Now we have a completely unbalanced data set because very few people are tested, and we think we have a skewed population in the study because we think people who did do the app are probably, we have many more people that suffer from COVID because they say, oh, there's an app, maybe we can contribute because I'm suffering from COVID. I want to contribute my data. I expect we have lots of them, but they haven't been tested, so we don't know about them. So, yeah.
I see. So you said you used also data augmentation for this machine learning model. Is that
we
for
did
solving imbalance cluster level, or was the increasing the number of data sets?
Interestingly, it was to. I laugh about this because in this particular paper we had to compensate the imbalance on the healthy class because we didn't know. So we had the lowest healthy class and the COVID positive class, especially for some classes like asthma and things. So we had to augment that. The paper has the details of how we did it and how the results were. We hope not to have to augment the data, but it generally is quite a useful thing. But we didn't do anything new. We just used traditional techniques.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks again for sharing the very exciting, very latest work to us, and we enjoy a lot. And thank you very much.
Thank you everyone.
I think this is the end of today's seminar. So thanks everyone for attending today's seminar. And once again, I'd like to thank Professor Mascolo for speaking at today's seminar. Thank you very much.